We've mastered multi-layer farming. We've covered every aspect of water pressure, and we've gone into the nitty-gritty on districts and travel. Through all of this, the Timberborn Beginner Survival Guide has left out one crucial topic. Despite everything we've covered, we haven't touched on anything to do with the Ironteeth, the industrious second faction in Timberborn. Sure, on this channel, you could watch Siltforge for some more perspective on their playstyle, but it's not a walkthrough in any sense of the word. So, before we wrap up with the final episode of the Timberborn Beginner Survival Guide, and in lieu, for now, of the release of the Ironteeth Beginner Survival Guide, we're going to pause for a minute to go over some of the main differences you can expect when you first start your Ironteeth playthrough. Hello, and welcome back to a rather unorthodox episode of the Timberborn Beginner Survival Guide. So I have called this colony interlude, and we are starting with our Ironteeth. Now, the important thing to note right at the beginning of the Ironteeth is there is very little difference in the first three things you need to do: getting wood, gathering berries, and getting water. So we're going to make one of them gather wood. We're going to make one of them gather berries. We will connect these up. Now, the only major difference here will come from that third need we just talked about, water. So it's not going to make much of a difference here on plains because we've got one option for water for the most part at the beginning. But if we come down here to water and we look at our deep water pump, it makes one water every third of an hour. That's the same as the Folktails. It only is one job, same as the Folktails. The big difference here is that it has a maximum depth of 6. That is triple the maximum depth of 2 on a Folktails pump. So we can set this up right here. We can connect that up. So with that built, if we were to go over here, we can see there is a depth marker here that has a limit of 6. Of course, this only goes 1 deep, so it doesn't matter. But if this was deeper, we could continue dredging water up from a lot deeper. Now, the first major difference I want to touch on. With the basic needs satisfied, our colony can continue for at least a little while without us building anything else. But we will face the very natural expiration of our beavers once they get too old. Now, as we know, the Folktails, we just need to build some housing for. But if we were to build 2 of these barracks to get 20 shelters, it wouldn't do anything for our Ironteeth population. Instead of building barracks, Ironteeth reproduce with breeding pods. These are going to be 10 wood, and they're going to take 5 water and 5 berries to produce 1 Ironteeth baby. In general, with a 0 well-being, a single one of these breeding pods will support 10 population. So with 14 beavers here, we could have 1 or 2 of these. I'm going to start with 1, and then we will see how things go. And now this breeding pod is complete. So if we look at this, currently says breeding halted. It's waiting for beavers to bring the water and the berries. There we go, and then it'll start. As I said, that'll consume 5 water and 5 berries to produce a new baby. And that'll fill up this breeding progress bar as time goes on. I don't remember exactly how long it takes to produce a new baby in one of these, but it's a matter of days. Now, an important thing to note about these breeding pods, right now there's only a little bit of progress here, but as time goes on, like anything else, it'll fill up this progress bar. If we pause this building, that progress bar will not be filled up any more than it currently is. That does allow you, if you wanted to do something perhaps risky or silly, you could let this breeding progress bar fill up all the way on a bunch of these breeding pods and then pause all of them. And you could essentially have a way to produce a lot of baby beavers very quickly if you had the need. Now, this goes doubly true with Ironteeth if you later on get these advanced breeding pods. These are going to take treated planks and metal, And instead of water, they are going to use extract, but advanced breeding pods will produce adult beavers and not baby beavers. So if you were to pause it at the moment right before the baby beaver was born, or the adult beaver in this case, then if something, say, were to wipe out your entire population, you could very quickly replace it. But that all is the basic mechanic of how Ironteeth breed. Now, much like Folktails, they do have houses. They have different numbers of inhabitants than the Folktails ones do, and they are different sizes. That all I will let you figure out how to play around with on your own, because that is going to be really a matter of taste what you use there. I'm not going to build one because we don't have the logs to spare. So things here are currently going fine. But we started out with 130 berries. We are rapidly dropping in the number of berries that we have. So as always, one of the first things we need to do is get to farming. And we will see that this farmhouse is a little different. Instead of the efficient farmhouse that the Folktails have, the Ironteeth just have a regular farmhouse. This is going to be 20 logs, and it's only going to employ 2 beavers. This is going to mean, well, obviously, that it is less efficient than a Folktails farmhouse. I believe it's actually the same space efficiency, though, because I think this is slightly smaller than the Folktails one. If we place that right here, it will be built by our builders, and then employing 2 beavers, we will have the opportunity to plant some crops. And if we go over here to plant crops, we will see that every single one of them are different. So, what we have in order: kohlrabi. These need absolutely no processing. They take 3 days to grow. They produce 2 kohlrabi. These are, for now, the main thing that we are going to plant. It is also important to note here that Ironteeth farmers are going to take more time to plant a big crop field like this because there are less of them. I don't know if they actually take more time on each individual crop, but they do take more time because there are fewer. So these kohlrabis here, they will be planted in 2 days. They will grow, and then we can begin to eat them. The other options we have cassava. Cassava take 5 days to grow. They produce 1 cassava. That cassava needs to be taken to a fermenter, which requires power. Each individual cassava plant produces about 1.5 edible cassava. And quite frankly, should never be planted early on. Cassava is a bit of a noob trap because it feels like it being a plant that you need to process, that it should produce more than kohlrabi do. It does not. Kohlrabi produce more edible food per day than cassava do, despite the fact that cassava is going to take more jobs to produce and more time. I have no idea why that was chosen when they were balancing this game, but it's what they decided to go with, and it's what we have to deal with. So my advice is do not plant cassava until you are planting it purely for the well-being bonus, because you have so many beavers that can fill out your farmhouses. It should not be treated as a staple crop for your early colony, because you will just end up having a lot of hungry beavers. Now our other options here. We have soybeans. Those are going to take 8 days, make 2 soybeans. Once again, they're going to need to be fermented with canola oil. They end up producing more than kohlrabis once you can actually get that production chain going. It's going to take far too much setup for us to get to in this episode. We also have canola. Canola is going to go into our oil press here, produce canola oil, which cannot be eaten itself, but it does get used in the fermenter with soybeans and in the food factory with eggplants and algae. Everything that requires canola oil is going to be a better foodstuff late game, but it requires a lot more setup, a lot more jobs, a lot more power, and a lot more space. We also have corn. Now, corn is going to be special. It takes 10 days to grow, produces 2 corn. It does need to be processed in a food factory. But my advice, if you are doing an Ironteeth playthrough, start with kohlrabies, get your colony going, and then push to produce a food factory as quick as you can. These are going to take planks, they're going to take gears, and they're going to take metal. And a food factory will need power. But corn should be your second staple food stuff. On this map, it's really not great for Ironteeth, but I would send them up here through this forest and across here to start gathering metal. And then I would build this food factory as quick as I could, because corn is going to be a lot better than kohlrabies, but it also doesn't require a multi-step process like anything with canola oil does. So we could essentially replace this entire field with corn and end up producing a lot more food and be able to support a bigger population without needing many more jobs than we need just to support these kohlrabies. It also takes 10 days to grow, so unlike this smaller field, I could probably make most of this fertile land corn and have our farmers working full-time to harvest and replace the corn that we are growing so that we're not wasting time with our farmers sitting here doing nothing. And then after corn, we have eggplants, 12 days, 3 eggplant. You once again put that in a food factory with canola oil. You get a lot more eggplant out. Compared to kohlrabies, that's 1 eggplant every 4 days, which ends up producing 6 edible food. So space-wise, a lot more efficient. Time-wise, more efficient. It just, again, takes a lot and a lot and a lot of setup and materials to get to that point. It's not early game at all. Eventually, we would get to the point where we get these hydroponic gardens. Now, these are going to be special. They are stackable buildings. They produce either mushrooms or algae. They're very space efficient. They can be placed on dead ground like this. They don't have to be placed on fertile ground, but they do end up using a lot more water than growing any of these crops do because they use any water at all. They take planks, gears, and metal. And actually using them is going to be in either a food factory or a fermenter. They take canola oil. Again, lots of setup, but these do end up producing a lot of food. So this ends up being your late game food option, but once you get to that point where you can reliably sustain hydroponic gardens, you are pretty much set on food. And now, as we can see, our beavers are running out of trees to cut over here, which means that we will want to create a forester. That is going to work the same way that it does with the Folktails, where it is 10 logs and 7 planks. So we will need to wait on that for a minute while we touch on power. So much like, or exactly like, with the Folktails, we're going to want to make a lumber mill to get planks. As we see, 20 logs to build. It takes 1 log, 2/3 of an hour, produces 1 plank, 2 jobs, 75 horsepower. You may notice, if you've been paying attention while playing the Folktails, the industrial lumber mill does have a better rate of return than the Folktails lumber mill does. It produces more planks more quickly. I think for the same amount of logs. I believe it's just quicker. So we'll end up building one of these right here. But first, of course, we will need power. And as we will see here, we've got this compact water wheel. This is only 1 wide compared to the Folktails 2. It produces 60 horsepower per cubic meter per second of water. So we're going to start by building that. Just see how much power it ends up generating us. I'm guessing it's not going to be much because of the spot it is in. Also, quite obviously, I'm not really that concerned about pathing right now. This is not how you should be doing this at all. But our water wheel is producing 78 horsepower, so pretty much exactly as much as we need. Much like the Folktail water wheels, as much water as you can shove into this 1x1, it'll increase the amount of power that this compact water wheel outputs. But this currently is all we need. So we'll just set down our lumber mill right here, and we will use that to create planks. Now, as time goes on, our options on the Ironteeth are going to expand. We will later on unlock this large water wheel, which takes a lot of materials to produce, but it does produce power far more efficiently than the compact water wheels do, or the water wheels that the Folktails have. It is raised above the ground, so it does need to be placed at least 2 above the water that is running through it, or I guess the base of that water. And it is wider. It's about 5 long and 2 wide, so it's the biggest water wheel in the game, but it does produce the most per cubic meter per second. So you will want to move to that later on. We also do have the large power wheel. This is going to be like the Wheel of Shame that the Folktails have, except for this time they are employing 4 beavers rather than 1, and they produce up to 300 horsepower compared to the, I think, 50 maybe that the regular power wheel that the Folktails have produces. It also has power hookups on 3 different sides. So if you want to use beaver power to produce horsepower, it is a better option than what the Folktails have. The other major difference that the Ironteeth have compared to the Folktails is going to be the engine. This is kind of a mid-game structure. It once again has 3 hookups. It takes logs and produces horsepower. Now, largely, this should not be the main way that you're producing horsepower because it does use up your logs. But if you are short horsepower or during a drought, you don't have enough gravity batteries to save enough horsepower to keep everything running, then you can burn some logs with engines and kind of kickstart and keep that horsepower up enough that everything can continue to run. And now that we are starting to store planks, we can finally unlock and build our forester. Now this in and of itself is going to function exactly the way that the Folktails forester does. The main difference is going to be in the trees that we can make. So with our forester built, if we come down here to plant trees, we will see that we have blueberries. Of course, those are used for breeding pods, so realistically, we would want to build a forester somewhere where we could maintain a blueberry field. It's not necessary right now. As we can see, we've got more blueberries than we can store and more than are growing here. We have coffee bushes. These are going to be a mid to late game item. You use them with the coffee brewery. It produces coffee. It's a well-being item for the Ironteeth. We are not going to touch on that right now. Other than that, we have birch trees. These work the same as Folktails. As with them, don't plant them unless you really need wood within 7 days. We have pine trees. These are going to be what we plant in an area like this, where we want some quick growing trees at the very beginning of the game, and maybe some pine resin later on. We also have oak trees. As we know, the best tree to plant, produces the most logs per day, does take 30 days to fully mature, so they can be a bit of a waiting game until you get enough that you are constantly harvesting them. But as we will see, the Folktails do not have maple or chestnuts. The only thing they have are mangroves. Now, mangroves are going to be an interesting tree option because, number one, they can only be planted in water. Now, a mangrove is going to be unique other than being an aquatic tree for 2 reasons. Number one, as we can see, it takes 10 days to produce 2 logs, which makes it a better log producer than pines are. Pines take 12 days to produce 2 logs versus 10 days to produce 2 logs. So if you were to have, say, an abundance of water that one could make fresh if they put in a little bit of effort, you could effectively replace any sort of tree growing farm that you were using pine for with mangroves. The other unique thing about mangroves is going to be that every 10 days after they grow, they produce 4 mangrove fruits. Now, mangrove fruit are gathered by a gatherer flag anywhere nearby your mangrove trees, and they are simply edible. So you simply get 4 edible fruit every 10 days for any mangrove that you are not cutting down for wood, which makes them, in my opinion, the best tree in the game. Now, they still do produce fewer logs than oaks, so you will still want to use oaks for your main wood production, but mangroves also produce fruit. Now, with a drought rapidly approaching, I am going to just dam up over here. And with them building that, I'm also going to start on storage. Now, I'm mostly doing this because I need to build a small tank to store water. And if I don't do that, our beavers are all going to die. So yeah, we should survive. Maybe. But while we are waiting to see whether or not our colony survives this drought, and it will, it's as good of a time as any other than before all the water drained off the map to go over storage for the Ironteeth. So the Ironteeth, as we see when it comes to small tanks, exactly the same as the Folktails. When it comes to something like a medium warehouse to store kohlrabi, that is also going to function exactly the same as it does for the Folktails. Small warehouses, also exactly the same. No real change with those. And of course, the large warehouse will be exactly the same, 3x3, 2 high. The main difference is going to come in the form of our industrial piles. So first of all, as we can see, we only have 2. We have the small and the large. If we look at the outline here, we will also see that unlike the Folktail industrial piles, the Ironteeth ones have a roof to them. So if I were to, over here near our lumberjacks, place down an industrial pile and make it wood, I could then take another small industrial pile and I could put it right here, and I could build a staircase up to it. And then once that is built, both of these piles will function exactly as you would expect piles to. This functions the exact same way for the large industrial pile. If I build that here, and then I wanted to build a second large industrial pile on top of it, rather than having to stack dirt on top of platforms or be unable to stack up piles until late game, the Ironteeth can just do it right off the bat. So you can have a lot more industrial material stored right where you want it, right on top of things from the very get-go. Now, as that drought ends and the water starts to flow back through, which may take a minute, it looks like our colony has probably survived this ordeal. I say probably. I will turn up the working hours so that the water starts getting pumped and we don't have a bunch of dehydrated beavers. And they will go... Why is he doing it that way? They will go back to planting the kohlrabi that died, and we should be fine. We'll eat the berries for a day, but we will end up surviving. Okay, and there we go. And with this dam finally completed, I think that is where I'm going to end this weird episode of the Timberborn Beginner Survival Guide. There are still more differences between the Ironteeth and the Folktails. For example, if we come down here to metal, we'll see that they have an efficient mine rather than the regular mine that the Folktails have. It takes extract and then produces extra scrap. But I will save those differences for you to discover on your own for now. Until the views start declining and I pull the ripcord on the Ironteeth Beginner Survival Guide, this is where I will leave it. As always, if you enjoyed these Timberborn videos, then please consider subscribing. With the beginner survival guide ending, it's going to be more weird stuff like this on the channel. I don't know. We'll see what works and what doesn't together. And maybe point out your favorite difference between the Ironteeth and the Folktails in the comments. Mine is the mangroves, as I already mentioned. And with that, thank you so much for watching. Interlude, what I called this colony, will not return, but Tutopolis will. Goodbye.